What about abortion? Right? Let's start this off with a non-controversial issue. Well, abortion touches so many other issues. It touches the issues in biology, so it's a scientific issue. It touches issues in philosophy as far as personhood goes, so it's a philosophical issue. It clearly is a cultural issue and a political issue. So I think it's one that we really need to get some clarity on, and I think, because I'm coming from a Christian worldview, Christians need to understand how to dialogue with this, with other people about this in a tactical way. Now, I know most people are going to take a little bit of offense to this that are Christians. And please, I don't mean to offend any of my brothers and sisters. And let me state right at the forefront of this discussion, I hold a very high view of Scripture. So what I'm about to say, although it may seem controversial at first, hear me out. When we're approaching the issue of abortion, where should we start? I believe, and I think that it's really just, actually I think it's illustrated in Scripture when we see the Apostle Paul talking to those in Acts 17. Read it for yourself. Where do we start? I think we should start where people are at. If a person holds a high view of Scripture, then maybe we should start there, right? Because if Scripture is the authority in a person's life, then if Scripture points to abortion being wrong or immoral, then that's where we should start. But generally speaking, if you're not convinced as a rational being why abortion is wrong, then I think the best place to start is one at the science and then moving over to the philosophy. Let me explain to you what I mean. I think abortion could be stated like this. Killing an innocent human being intentionally is always wrong. Abortion kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is wrong. Well, what's the very central point to really that entire argument? What is the unborn? That is the central issue in all of this. Because if the unborn are just a clump of cells, well, then there's no justification needed to do an abortion, right? But if the unborn are human, like you and like me, there is no justification possible to take the life of an unborn child. What does the science say? Let me sum up what every respectable embryological textbook actually says. At conception, when sperm meets egg, they give up their constituents, and a whole, distinct, living human being now exists. A human organism with its own genetic makeup. Here's something really interesting about that. Most of the pro-choice, the pro-abortion side, concedes that. Some of the most well-known feminists who are pro-choice feminists concede that it is a human being. But let me take this a little bit further for you. If the science of embryology says that, we always hear this question, well, it's debatable of when life begins. Well, let me just quote to you, a paraphrase rather, of the law of abiogenesis. Abiogenesis basically says that life cannot arise from non-life. So somebody would have to prove that there's a point in time in the process of conception that life wasn't there, that there was non-life. Let me take you through that timeline a little bit, just in case you don't know. And if you've never heard the story of the birds and the bees, well, this is going to be a really quick version of it. First of all, you have a living man and a living woman. To be politically correct, I'll say it this way. You have a living woman and a living man. The living woman brings an egg that is alive in some way shape, or form, there is life within that egg. A man brings multiple sperm that are alive and living. They do the act of procreation, reproduction. They have sex. And in that process, the living man delivers his living sperm to the living woman and her living egg. They come together, and at no point does life cease to exist, because at the moment conception is made, in most cases, in most usual cases, what you have is a zygote. You have 23 chromosomes from the man and 23 chromosomes from the woman who've come together amongst other biological mechanisms to create a whole distinct living human being at that point. So life never ceases to exist in the process. It's a continuum. Now, yes, sperm and egg die off, so their lives end in that sense, but not before they produce new life in the process. So it's patently false to say we don't know when life begins. It's patently false when you hear any politician say, well, that's above my pay grade. That's just intellectually lazy, period. So what if the pro-choice side is conceding that this is a human being, and if the science says clearly that a whole distinct living human being is present at conception, and life never ceases to exist except at death, then why or what is the main issue remaining? Well, it seems that it's personhood. Let me give you, and by the way, it's not my idea, I'm repeating this magnificent way to illustrate and to have this conversation. Let me give you an acronym that will help you work through the 4 areas in which we differ from the embryo we once were to the person or the adult that we are today, and why in this acronym, how it will unpack the fact that none of these instances or none of these moments in time or the continuum of life and these moments throughout it will give us value. The fact is, we're already valuable by the fact that we are human. The acronym is SLED, S-L-E-D. S stands for size. Let me illustrate it this way. Let's say I have a toddler, a 2-year-old, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. Clearly, the 2-year-old girl does not have her reproductive system developed because she's undeveloped, but she's also smaller, isn't she? Well, does the 2-year-old being smaller in size than the 14-year-old justify or give me the justification that I can kill the 2-year-old merely because of the size difference? Well, no. Well, does the 2-year-old have less value because of the size? Well, no. It definitely doesn't have less value to the point where you can take its life. How about L? L stands for level of development, which is what I was hinting to when I was talking about the reproductive system in the 14-year-old. A 2-year-old does not have a developed reproductive system, but a 14-year-old most likely does, right? So does it stand to reason that because the 14-year-old is more developed, that we could take the life of the 2-year-old because they just don't have the value to be able to hold on to life by the hands of someone else? Well, of course not. That's silly, right? How about E? E stands for environment. Let's take that 2-year-old again and that 14-year-old. I have this 2-year-old here, and he's inside doing homework. But the 14-year-old is outside playing. Does somehow the difference in location from the 2-year-old and the 14-year-old make them more valuable to each other, or make them more valuable in any respect? Well, of course not. How about the 2-year on its own? Let's say this 2-year-old decides to get up from reading and go outside and play. Does that 2-year-old, somewhere in the process of moving from reading a book to going outside and digging in the dirt, gain value? No. So it seems like size doesn't give us the justification needed for humanity to not have value, or to have value for that matter. It seems like the level of development doesn't do that either. And it seems like the environment that somebody in doesn't change who or what they are. What about D, for degree of dependency? Now, this is a pretty big one, isn't it? Because we clearly know that the unborn is 100% dependent for their life in as far as the health of that child, and why there's warnings on cigarette packages and women are told not to drink alcohol when they're pregnant. Well, let me illustrate this for you. Here I have this 2-year-old again. And you're driving down a backcountry road, probably not far from where I live. And it's cold, it's raining, it's dark. And you know where you're at, there isn't a house or another person for miles and miles and miles. But you happen upon this 2-year-old. And you look around, there's no sign of any person that could be responsible for them. And at that moment, because of the temperature and because of the rain and because of the environment that that child is in, you hold within your hands the entire life of that child. Another way to state it is, that child is 100% dependent upon whether you do something or not. So their life is totally dependent on you. Does that then give you the right to say that child is not valuable because of the degree of dependency by which now you have taken on from the mere fact that you stumbled upon this child? Well, no. I hope that no one watching this would say, well, I'm just going to keep driving. I hope nobody would be that cruel. So if size, level of development, or degree of dependency does not bring the value needed to say that the embryo we once were is less valuable and could be destroyed compared to the human or the adult that we are today, then there doesn't seem to be any reasonable place for a human to take on or to lose value in the sense that we could take its life, that we could destroy it. So where does this leave us? It leaves us back with where we started, our argument, our syllogism. Intentionally taking the life of an innocent human being is morally wrong. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is wrong.